Good afternoon. Yesterday, the Senate Transport Committee voted to kill Bill C-48, a bill that would attack Alberta's vital economic interests, would undermine our constitutional jurisdiction, would jeopardize jobs, and would undermine national unity. I would like to thank the senators who voted against Justin Trudeau's attack on Alberta in Bill C-48. And on behalf of the government and people of Alberta, I call upon all senators to sustain the decision, support the decision of the Senate Transport Committee in killing Bill C-48 when it goes back to the Senate for a full vote the week after next. I think this is a vindication for the strong approach taken by our new government to stand up without apology for the economic interests of Alberta, for our jobs, and for our place in the Canadian Federation. Within 3 hours of having been sworn in as Alberta's 18th Premier, I attended and appeared before the Senate Transport Committee in Edmonton to speak bluntly about the implications of that bill for national unity. I spoke from the heart to the senators who traveled here to Alberta about how this would deepen a divide in our federation, about how Albertans have done so much to contribute so generously to Canada's prosperity in recent decades, and how all we want in return is the right to be able to develop and sell our resources at a fair price. That means coastal pipelines, and that means Bill C-68 must die in the Senate. I want to thank those senators for listening to our voice, and thank my colleague Sonia Savage for having joined me at that Senate hearing, a message that we will continue to amplify. I would like to call upon all Albertans to take a moment to contact members of the Canadian Senate, asking them to support the Senate committee's opposition to Bill C-48. We will make available on my Facebook page and in other social media channels contact information for all of Alberta's senators. We ask that people contact them and senators from other provinces in a polite and respectful way to send a message, to listen not just to the people of this province, but to senators from across the country on that committee who made a courageous decision, a pro-jobs decision, a pro-national unity decision. I will be writing tomorrow to all of the members of the Canadian Senate, asking them to support the committee's opposition to Justin Trudeau's Bill C-48. I have invited all members of the Alberta Senate caucus or Senate delegation to have lunch with me in Edmonton next Thursday to discuss this and other vital issues. As well, next Thursday, the government will be presenting to the new Alberta legislature a motion calling on the Senate to oppose and kill Bill C-48, this discriminatory attack on Alberta, and we hope that it will have the support of the official opposition. And so we will continue to work on behalf of Albertans in speaking truth to power, not only on Bill C-48, but also on the No More Pipelines law, Bill C-69. The day after I became Premier, I traveled to Ottawa to present in the strongest terms our opposition to the No More Pipelines law. And I made it clear in both official languages that if passed, that bill would jeopardize national unity and undermine our shared prosperity as Canadians by creating massive additional investor uncertainty that would scare away job-creating investment and would make it impossible for companies to come forward with future potential pipelines. Yesterday, one of Canada's top business leaders, Nancy Southern, spoke about how Bill C-69 would have massive damage, not just for the oil and gas industry, but for jobs and investment generally. One of Canada's top business leaders saying that what a shame it is that an Alberta company increasingly has to pursue opportunity outside of Canada, and that is just wrong, and one of the many reasons we need to defeat Bill C69, or to completely rewrite it. As I said to the Senate, it doesn't need a nip and a tuck, it needs complete reconstructive surgery. And that is why I am pleased with reports from Ottawa this afternoon that the Senate Energy Committee apparently has accepted all or most of the amendments proposed to C69 by the Government of Alberta, by the Canadian Energy Pipeline Association, and by the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers. I made it clear to that Senate panel that unless all of these amendments are accepted, the Government of Alberta will vigorously oppose Bill C69. So we haven't yet seen a final report from the Energy Committee, but reports this afternoon out of Ottawa leave us with a sense, leave us encouraged that the Senate Energy Committee has heard the concerns of Alberta's government and is fundamentally rewriting the bill to reflect the need for investor certainty. We will also be, we'll wait and see what the final outcome of the committee report is, but we may also be proposing a motion to the legislature next Thursday on this issue. We'll certainly be raising it in the meeting that I've requested with Alberta's senators next week. And finally, I have additional announcement I'd like to make. As we know, we're on the cusp of the May long weekend, a Victoria Day long weekend, and before and during the last campaign, I said the United Conservative government will end the war on fun. And today is the beginning of the end of the war on fun, with regulations that we are announcing to make it easier for people to responsibly consume alcohol in provincial parks and at festivals across Alberta. It's time to lift Prohibition-era restrictions around liquor consumption in Alberta and give adults the freedom to act responsibly. This is so timely as we've been heading into a long weekend in Alberta, as I've said. That means many people will be heading to our beautiful provincial parks to go camping and spend time outdoor with friends and family. So we're relaxing liquor constraints in municipalities and provincial parks in Alberta, allowing liquor consumption in provincial parks starting this long weekend. In particular, lifting the ban on consumption in a number of provincial parks where it's existed. And in the future, people will be able to grab a beer and walk around a summer festival in this province without fear of being arrested or ticketed or fined. You know, if they can do this in pretty much every country of Europe, I think we can treat Albertans as responsible grown-ups as well. So with that, happy Victoria Day long weekend. I'm looking forward to your questions.
We'll start with questions in the room.
Premier Kenney, CBC. You're committing to get rid of the carbon tax next week. Ottawa has previously praised Alberta's climate leadership plan, including the tax. How concerned are you that you could be jeopardizing your working relationship with the federal government?
Albertans voted by 55% to scrap the NDP's job-killing carbon tax, and that will be Bill number 1 of the legislature introduced next week. It will save our Alberta taxpayers $1.4 billion. It will create at least 6,000 new jobs. And so, unlike Justin Trudeau, we're listening to ordinary people who don't want to be punished for living ordinary lives, for filling up their gas tank or heating their homes. So, you know, I'll let Justin Trudeau, in the lead up to the next federal election, defend his plan to punish people for filling up their gas tanks and heating their homes. But I'll stand with the people of Alberta and with the governments of Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, and New Brunswick in fighting Justin Trudeau's punishing federal carbon tax.
One more follow-up. Specifically, how worried are you that axing the carbon tax will make Ottawa think twice about reapproving the Trans Mountain Pipeline?
These are two completely separate issues. The federal government already approved the Trans Mountain Pipeline, and they are engaged in supplementary Aboriginal consultations as a result of a court order. But I can tell you, I cannot, if the federal government were to say that we're not allowed to sell Alberta's resources to global markets because our provincial government will not punish people with a job-killing tax, Albertans would be quite rightly outraged if that's the if that decision were to be taken by the federal government. We're confident that they will approve Trans Mountain for a second time. And the reality is this, that the NDP's deal with Justin Trudeau was a total failure for Albertans. All we got out of that Trudeau-Notley alliance was a job-killing carbon tax and no pipelines. This whole idea of social license is frankly a joke. We have the carbon tax did not move a single government, political party, environmental group, or special interest from opposition to pipelines to support for pipelines. And that's one of the reasons 2/3 of Albertans have consistently opposed the carbon tax, and why it will be repealed, why there will be no Alberta carbon tax by May the 30th of this year.
However, disregarding that the full Senate would kill Bill C-48. I mean, committee's one thing, but for the Senate to kill the government bill would be pretty unusual.
It would be unusual, but we are optimistic. We believe the senators have been listening to the voices of not only Albertans, but other people across the country who realize that there is no reason for this bill. If this bill made any sense, then the federal government would be imposing a tanker ban on OPEC dictator oil that brings oil into the Bay of Fundy or to the east coast of Canada or to the St. Lawrence Seaway. This government would be imposing a tanker ban on the southern BC coast. It would be imposing a tanker ban on the Alaska tankers that bring crude oil through off the west coast of Canada, often through Canadian waters. They're not doing any of those things. All they're doing is a discriminatory attack on efforts to export Canadian Alberta energy off the northwest coast in a project that is supported by many First Nations. So we stand today in solidarity with the Eagle Spirit group of First Nations and others in northern British Columbia who want to be partners in responsible resource development so they can move their people from poverty to prosperity. And I believe a growing number of senators are listening to that. Not only will I be sending a letter tomorrow to all members of the Senate and meeting personally, I hope, with all or most members of the Alberta Senate delegation next week. We will also be bringing forward a motion that I hope is supported unanimously by Alberta MLAs, calling for the killing of Bill C-48. In addition to that, I will be sending our Energy Minister, Sonia Savage, to Ottawa the week after next to meet with as many senators as possible to be a strong voice for Alberta jobs in opposition to C-48. The Senate is not sitting next week, but Minister Savage will be down there the week following.
So is there a follow-up question, please?
Have you been given any indication from the federal government on how quickly they would have imposed the federal backstop on Alberta?
No, we have not heard from that.
Many people sort of feel the fix is in on 48. We're probably surprised by that the Senate maybe delayed. What about 69 though? Are you as optimistic about 69, even with the new amendments? Do you think that will be something you can live with if it does?
Well, I would say we'll have to wait and see what the final report is from the Energy Committee of the Senate, but the reports we have today are quite encouraging that all or most of the amendments put forward by the Alberta government and the energy industry have been accepted by the committee. And I would just say to all of the other senators who were not on that committee, please have the humility to listen to the senators who spent hundreds, if not thousands of hours studying this bill in great detail and who crisscrossed the country listening to hundreds of witnesses. That committee is sending a message to the whole Senate here, not to attack jobs and growth, not to undermine national unity. So I believe there is a large and growing number in the Senate who are opposed to Trudeau's No More Pipelines law, Bill C-69, but I'm not going to suggest this will be an easy fight, and that's why I'm calling on Albertans to send an email or make a phone call to senators. They've got, we think, probably a couple of weeks to send a strong message. That's why we'll be having Minister Savage down there, meeting with as many senators as possible. We'll be making a full court press to ask the Senate to avoid damaging national unity and our economy. Please vote against Bill C-69, and we think there's a good chance they will do so.
Do you have a follow-up question?
We'll now go to questions on the line.
Operator, are there any callers on the line? Go ahead.
Operator, can you tell me specifically, will there be anything anything on the agenda, any proposals when you meet with the Alberta senators next week that you hope comes out of the legislation?
Well, I'll be reiterating our key points. There are some of the Alberta senators who have not been in line with Alberta's clear economic interests here, and we just want to be very clear that these issues, these two bills, are full frontal attacks on Alberta's jobs and our economic future. And so we also hope that they'll attend the legislature and see at least a unanimous motion, I hope, passed against Bill C-48. If they want to get into more detail, we'll certainly be willing to talk about amendments to Bill C-69 to describe the amendments that have been brought forward by the Government of Alberta, the petroleum producers, and the Pipeline Association. And so if they have technical questions, I'll be there with officials and our ministers of both energy and environment and parks to handle those questions and to get into a respectful conversation. But those senators, their job is to represent the province and the people of Alberta, and on behalf of the government and people of Alberta, I'll be there to send that very clear message.
Chris, do you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, just with the two developments on CCTV's legislation in the last 24 hours, do you feel like your message, the government's message, is gaining some momentum or traction, or is it still too soon to say, do you think, that these issues have been resolved?
Well, it's too early to claim victory on these bills. They still have to go back to the full Senate, but we clearly have momentum. The wind is in our sails. A growing number of senators understand the devastating effect that these two bills would have on the Canadian economy and on national unity. That's why within hours of becoming Premier, that my very first act was to send a clear message against Bill C-48, and on my second day, our third day as Premier, was to send that message in Ottawa, both to the Senate directly and to Prime Minister Trudeau. And I think they also see that we have a growing number of allies on these issues in the governments of Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, and New Brunswick. And I haven't seen I guess we'll be seeing Newfoundland results in a couple of hours, but there's a reasonably good chance that Newfoundlanders could be electing Premier Crosby, who agrees with us completely on all of these bills. So I think you see growing national momentum. Alberta is no longer isolated, and I think I want to thank those senators, especially the ones who are not from Alberta, for having heard our serious concerns. I think this is a very positive day for the Federation. And after all, as I reminded senators in Ottawa on May the 3rd at the C-69 hearing, one of their jobs is to be a voice for the regions and to be protectors of national unity. I think that message resonated, and we'll continue to send that message as vigorously as we can in the days to come.
Operator, is there another caller on the line?
Premier, you've started your lobbying effort in several directions just in the last few minutes. I'm sure you'll expect a lobbying effort from the Trudeau government, particularly among the senators, to try to turn them away from this decision. The surprising decision that has never been noted so far was brought by a recently decommissioned journalist. But do you expect the Trudeauites to back off? I mean, they've been bloodied on this. Do they really want more of a battle, or do you think there's some sense that they might leave the Senate to decide with a big, heavy, as usual lobbying effort?
Well, time will tell, Don. All I can say is if Justin Trudeau wants to win the next election, I think he better be seen as a pro-jobs prime minister. If he passes these two bills, he'll be sending a message that he's an anti-jobs prime minister. So the ballot question in the federal election this October will be on jobs, growth, and the economy. And these two bills are clearly against jobs, growth, and the economy, as well as I've argued national unity. So I would argue that, and this is what I said to Prime Minister Trudeau when we met a couple of weeks ago, that the political interests of his government are not aligned with passing these bills. You know what? Bill C-49, Don, was largely, I believe, written by Marlo Reynolds, who is the Chief of Staff to Minister McKenna. He was, for I believe, 16 years, the Executive Director of the Pembina Institute, during which time he took huge amounts of money from foreign-funded special interests explicitly to landlock Alberta Energy. He was a dues-paying member of the tar sands campaign, committing economic sabotage against Alberta. And now he's had the opportunity to write into federal legislation the policies that he lobbied for with foreign funding for so long. So I think, quite frankly, Don, you've got some ideological hotheads in the Trudeau government who have driven this agenda, and I believe there are a lot of members of the Trudeau government who believe it's gone too far, and they need to change course and focus on jobs in the economy. So I hope that those cooler heads prevail in the next 2 weeks, which are critical weeks for the future of Alberta's resource industries.
Do you have a
Sounds like the war room's already operating, but when do you expect to have that up and running within the energy department?
This summer, we will have it up and running, at least initially. We're already planning our first advocacy and advertising campaign. So I just had a briefing on this yesterday. Don't have a specific date yet, but certainly, Don, we're not waiting to actually set up the official agency to stand up for Alberta. We ran on a mandate of a bold approach to standing up for this province, and that's why my first 4 days as Premier were devoted to sending this message against these two bills in particular.
Thanks
Okay, guys, thanks very much. Appreciate it. Cheers.
Thank you.